Welcome, everyone, to my May 14th, 2024 webinar. This one called When Disease Persists, Even After We've Managed the Karma. This again was a topic that really drew me in, really attracted me, because I realized that was seeing a number of people. This is fairly recently, actually, and I've seen a number of people whose problems didn't seem to be resolving promptly. They were kind of persisting, and were potentially troubling. And so the people were concerned, and I wanted to make sure we got things better. And it struck me that it wasn't because we we weren't working effectively. It was because we hadn't had access to, hadn't been able to find um, the subtle aspects of the karma. We had found the karma itself and had worked with that, and I'll talk to you a little bit about how we did that. But we hadn't found some subtle aspect of that was holding on. And there were two reasons why that had not become apparent. Um, One was simply that the source of the karma, what had happened, was not a specific event. Now, some people had specific events like trauma of some kind, but it was more having to do with family patterns of thinking and behavior, influences from the family and other sources. I'll go through those in a little while. But it was like we weren't able in the sessions to get a handle on them because they weren't specific events or specific things that had happened that we could put a finger on, so to speak, and say, oh, there's that thing. Let's work with that and heal that. Um, the other reason was that people had, and this is really profound, is that people had gone right to healing. They worked very hard on themselves. So wherever they saw some sort of defect, that what they considered a defect, some weakness in their character or their personality, or that they were just, that they were having some problems or some pain, and they had found a way to work past those things. Um, and then they felt better for a while. And then the problem would return. So it was like they had bypassed really resolving a core thing. Now, I remember one of the first clients that I was really aware of this was someone with cancer, and um, I was working with them, and I thought we were making some good progress, but we ran into a roadblock. They wouldn't forgive a certain person about what had happened. Had been an incident or event which had actually become prolonged. A series of things unfolded from that experience, and they they hadn't forgiven the person. They held on to the resentment, the pain, the hurt, and I tried every trick I could, and I was unable to resolve that. And they succumbed to their cancer, and I was very disappointed. And I thought, what did I not do right? I was trying to get to that, but I couldn't get into the core of their feeling with them in a way that would allow them to resolve that. So that taught me the lesson that, people really needed to find where they were holding on to some pain, holding on to some hurt, holding on to some bad feeling like rejection or abandonment, um, or the another situation was the confusion around abuse that had occurred where a caregiver had abused somebody, one of my clients. And so they were facing an ongoing pain that they could not get rid of. And it was very difficult for me to find a way to get them to work with that, and to let go of what that last bit that they were holding on to. So they had overcome, so to speak, the direct effect of the abuse and had been gone on to live a pretty happy life, actually, and a very productive life, done wonderful accomplishments. Um, but there was still this underlying problem that was producing symptoms in their health. So that was the kind of situation that drew me into this. Now, I had an experience of a friend asking me a question. And first, they complained that they were having joint pain. Um, and they found that when they put their attention on it, their coherent attention could make the pain go away, but it would return. And they didn't feel, and this has been going on for quite a while, and they felt like they weren't actually making any progress in healing themselves, but they did know how to manage the pain, but only temporarily. And so the question that they asked was, what, and this was very straightforward, is what can I do to heal my joints so that the pain doesn't reoccur? That's a really reasonable question. What can you do to heal my joints? What can I do, he said, to heal my joints so that the pain doesn't reoccur? And I said, that's the topic of my webinar on Tuesday night. And the answer was very simple. And, this is like, here's the answer to the problem. And you sort of space out after this if you want to. When you put your attention on the pain or whatever that is bothering you. But what I said was put your attention on your pain. Just observe it without bringing your healing intention, which they described as their bliss, uh, without bringing your healing attention to it. Just see what the pain is like and stay with it until it dissipates on its own. Then bring your healing attention to it. The problem was that they were going, and this is the problem I found in so many people. The problem was that they were going into healing mode. They had a bad feeling, this pain in this case, and they wanted that to go away. And they got pretty good at making it go away. The problem was that there was a kind of bypassing of the actual problem. That is, what was causing the pain in the joints. And by bypassing that, it kept coming back. It was still there. And I'm going to give you a whole bunch of examples of how this has happened in clients that I've seen, so that this understanding of slipping past things, working past, going right to the healing, and not stopping to feel into what it was that was driving that. Now, this is not like peeling off layers of an onion that I've described before. Peeling off layers of the onion is when I'm working with somebody. This is my experience of it. And we deal with something. And then we come back in the next session and that part is resolved, but there's something even deeper. And we get into that. We peel that off. And then the next session, maybe we peel off another layer. And we may have to go through many layers before we finally get to the real core of what the problem is. But this is not the same thing. This is moving on, but moving on too soon. In the option method, which I learned from a book by Barry Kaufman and some recordings, in the option method, Barry Kaufman tells a story in his book about his grandmother, I think it was, not being willing to fly. And he asks one day in front of the family, there's a need to put her on an airplane and get her home because some bad weather is coming. And so in front of the family, he said it was a family reunion. In front of the family, he asks her, what is it about flying that frightens you? And she says, well, I'm afraid the plane will crash. Very persists. What is it about your flying and the plane crashing that really bothers you? Well, obviously, she says, that I would die. So he asks the question again, what is it about flying on the airplane and having the plane crash and you're dying that actually bothers you? She thinks about that for a moment. She says, well, I'm afraid that I'll be thrown from the airplane when it crashes and they won't be able to find my body. Well, most of us would have been satisfied at that point. Oh, I'm afraid your body won't be found. But Barry asks the question again, what is it about flying on the airplane and having it crash and you're dying and being thrown from the airplane that actually is upsetting you. And she has to think about that a little bit. She says, I'm afraid I'll be eaten by wild animals and God won't find me acceptable. At that point, Barry says, very good. But is it true that if you're thrown from the plane and not found, and wild animals eat your body, that God, whom you've always prayed to and you've considered a loving God who cares for you, why would he not find you acceptable? He's only interested in your soul. She was on the plane that afternoon. It was going through these layers, and I love that story. It was going through these layers upon layers to get into the very core of what was going on. So the problem is that if you leave off and go into healing energies, then you face that possibility of leaving behind an unresolved feeling. In this case, it was just a meme. It was a thought, an idea, a belief that she had in her head that God would not find her acceptable. But it wasn't conscious. She wasn't aware of it. It was just something that had played out in a fantasy and had been impressed into her by her own thinking. I don't think it came from an outside source. And she never dealt with it. She'd never made it conscious. So the simple process that I'm describing is that you put your attention on what is uncomfortable in you. It could be pain, it could be fear, it could be hurt, discouragement, so on. Things that uncomfortable feelings or events. And then you sit with that. You just observe it. And the trick to doing that, which those of you who have been with me for a while, you hopefully know by now. The trick to doing that is not to relive the experience, but to observe the experience as it happened or as it felt in you, to get the felt sense of that thing. So you just observe it. So the language is helpful. Something inside me hurts in some way, and I'm here with it. You bring that attention to it without judgment and without trying to change it, just letting it be there, just being in your awareness, as though you were looking at a little child that had fallen down and skinned its knee, and you are observing that. You're not feeling its pain. What you're seeing is it's in pain, and you want to deal with it that way, from the perspective of balance of an adult, a mature perspective, we call that, right? A settled perspective. But it's inside, it's the witnessing value inside, it's the presence that you bring to the situation. And the more you can be present with what's bothering you and just observe the bother, so to speak, observe what's going on, the easier it is. And even with trauma, even with severe trauma, physical trauma, abuse, whatever it is, if you can just observe that it has happened and this is how it feels, the feeling is in the present time. This is how it feels. And then you just wait for the pain to dissipate. And then you bring in the healing. Then you bring in the love. Even if you're using the tapping procedure, emotional freedom technique, you tap, tap, tap. Even if you use a technique like that, even though I feel horrible and I really wish this would end, I can remember a time where I could have had experiences recently where I felt really good, and I can live with that. I can feel positive about my life, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It starts out though. Now it sounds like you're bypassing, right? Doing exactly what I said to be very cautious about doing. It sounds like you're going right into healing mode, but it starts out with the even though. And so you say, even though I have this bad feeling, and then you make it worse. You really feel into it. And it's a god awful thing that I wish I could get rid of. So you feel that pain, you feel that anguish, you feel that loss, whatever that hurt feeling is. And then you turn it around. Excuse me. Then you bring in those good feelings. And so when you do that, you don't suffer. It's very simple, it's very easy. You just flow through that experience. Okay, let me give you some examples of what I mean. I've already given you the one where the client said, I have pain. What do I do? And I gave him the simple instructions. I'll check in with him in a day or two and see if whether or not my services are needed. Um, I think it's important to understand that when we do healing on ourselves, when we try to deal with our karma, things that have happened to us, our approaches are not wrong, particularly if we do it very spontaneously, just let it come into our awareness. So in many cases, our healing approaches will be sufficient because they will bring that coherent attention, relieve the impression that is there, and then we're ready to heal. And it really, in most cases, that's true. Um, and so I know lots of people who just do healing and they don't really explore the source of the thing. They just like, oh, here's what your problem is. Oh, yes, I see the energy here is disturbed. I'll work on that and everything will be fine. And often it is. It's really great. Um, so attending to the pain, whatever is ailing you, and connecting it with its source, even if you don't know what the source is, the source of this dis-ease is this uncomfortable feeling, and then tending to that allows the energy to dissipate. Just having your attention. After the energy dissipates, then you can use the healing modalities that you have effectively. Now, where do I come in? Sounds like you don't need me. Most people you won't, but there are times, either because of the nature of the trauma or where the suffering came from. Uh, but sometimes it just isn't sufficient to produce the healing. Uh, Frankly, healing yourself, I think, is more difficult than healing others. My own experience, at least, is that I'm my worst patient, and the second worst patients are people I have a strong emotional connection with, family members, close friends, and such. And then the people that I'm most affected with are the ones I have no emotional connection, well, very little emotional connection with. I may like them as friends and everything, or even just as clients, having that experience of, oh, I am with you in a very intimate kind of way. I'm feeling into your suffering and everything. So I know what the source of that is. Pardon me, I'm going to take a little sip. There we go. Um, but working very closely with people like that, we can get to the source of the karma. And then I have a myriad of tricks for working out how to deal with that karma. For instance, one of the classic examples, it's not a very common thing. One of the classic examples is where people are effectively cursed by someone else. They've had some unfortunate, unhappy encounter with somebody, and that person has, you know, sent them bad vibes. Now, one of the things that's very important in that kind of work is to understand that that person's vibes are theirs and they have an effect on whoever, yourself or the client or, whatever it is, the situation. And so sometimes I have to go back and actually work with the person who gave the curse and help them get over their problem and persuade them that the person they have cursed has suffered enough, and ask them to let go of that resentment. So that is one of the ways that we deal with karma. Another is just to deal with the energy itself. Something has happened, it has caused this pain, this suffering, this unhappiness, and we go in and we just deal with that. And we can do that even if it's very vague what remains. Even if it's just some family things, the way you were raised, but you don't remember, but you carry these feelings with you, and that needs to be addressed. And with chronic diseases, that is very much, it's a very common thing, that the actual residual source, conflict, pain, suffering, um, is very non-specific. And so it takes some sitting with that and working, being with it, to feel into that. And that's where my work really shines, is being able to get into those kind of feelings and bring some relief. I may bring that up to the client. Sometimes I don't bring it up to the client because I don't want them to make a story. So if I have a sense that this is a client who takes that kind of information and makes it a story of why they should be miserable, I may not share that information right at that time. So once the energy is dissipated, then I can bring in all of these energy healing approaches that I've learned uh, through matrix energetics and other approaches, things I've learned from books and courses, videos online. I can bring all of those things to bear to resolve whatever disease it is, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, or combinations of any and all of those things. So let me give you a few examples here to wrap up this discourse on what we do when disease persists even after we've managed the karma. Um, I have a client who um, has some tumors, but they're benign. They're not cancers. And they seem to represent feelings that are stuck, not moving. The funny thing about benign tumors is they don't really do much. Sometimes they grow slowly. Sometimes they grow to a certain size and stop, and they just sit there. And so they're like objects. They're just there. They're like markers. But the question is, what are the feelings that we don't identify? We can't access them. They're hidden from our view. Pardon me, I'm going to take another sip. So um, we can take clues from the kinds of things that are going on in our life, because nature has a way of giving us opportunities. Nice way to say that. Bringing things up to us, making us confront that which we have not yet dealt with. And I find that people often will say things that reveal what those subtle unhappinesses are that are inside of them, but they don't hear themselves do it. They're not aware of it. So I help to bring awareness there and then work with those feelings and the situations that may have brought those about. But a lot of times people just, they don't find, because it's not a particular thing that happened, it's just a situation that they were living in this lifetime, past lifetimes, family things that have gone on through generations even, that have come down to them. Um, and sometimes you might say it's not their karma. It wasn't stuff that they did. It was stuff that is in the family, but relates to feelings that they need to work out. So the nature provides them with this opportunity to work things out in that way. So that's one of the ways that we deal with karma, right? Is we pay the debt. We go through whatever suffering we have to go through, but then we have to clear it all out so that we heal and can continue on in this lifetime and grow, but spiritually. So that was one example. Another example: respiratory allergies, very very common symptom. Um, Allergies come from a bunch of things, um, but fundamentally, they're about not fitting in, not belonging, feeling alienated, feeling rejected, feeling outside. I've had people say, I was born in the wrong family. I don't belong here. And sometimes they have the insight, well, at least that gives me the opportunity to recognize where I'm not, that is where I don't belong, and to try to find who I am and where I fit in, where I belong. So That's fundamentally what's going on in allergies, but it's often very hard to find the source of that because it may not be in specific events. It's just not, it's just feeling like you don't belong. I've had kids, I was a pediatrician, you may remember, I've had kids tell me that they don't fit in, they don't belong, they don't have friends. It's very difficult for them. And visiting with the kid, you find there's nothing really wrong with the kid and their personality. It's just they haven't found where they haven't found their group. They haven't found the people that they can resonate with. And at that age when they're kids, they often don't even understand resonating with somebody or a group. They only understand the not resonating. They understand not fitting in. Um, so um, one of the things I do then in my work is to help them find what it is that they really are, who they really are, what kind of person they are, and then, where would they find that kind of person? Where would they find that kind of group? Um, I've seen people have friends with people. I go like, I don't understand why they're friends. But if you get really deep into the situation, if you're fortunate as an observer in my role, it may become apparent. Oh, there's certain things going on there that are making them feel accepted and connected to others. So that sense of connection is very important for people. And there are many people who, to one degree or another, some degree, kind of a spectrum on that, feel disconnected or very connected, like that. Let me give you one additional example. Um, no, I'm going to give you two additional examples. Um, Somebody said to me recently, life is good. And then they described some things that were good about their life. And I said, try this sentence. Life is good, but. Now, the reason I said that was that it was clear that they were not attending to the places that were hurting. They were not attending to the aspects of their life that were not fulfilling, that were not gratifying, that indeed were painful or uncomfortable. And one of the things that can emerge in that kind of, when we look at that, is that there's a quality, there's pardon me, an archetype in there that we call the saboteur. It's one of the fundamental archetypes. And everybody has a saboteur to some degree. Many of us, it's not very strong. Some of us, stronger. And a few people, it just ruins their life. Life is good, but, and they got a lot of buts. So they don't really say life is good ordinarily because they're feeling all of those bad aspects. They're insecure. They have self doubt. Um, but a lot of times they can't identify why. Now, when we do any kind of, psychoanalysis, I don't do that. We're trying to get into where did this come from? It's not trying to sound like Freud here. Um, you know, you know, it's very, very difficult. People spend decades in therapy because basically they can't find the source of their problem. It's too vague. It just had to do with kind of the situation they grew up in. Their parents, grandparents, siblings, um, the neighborhood, the schools they attended, the classes, the peers, the bullies in the neighborhood, so on and so forth. All of these different things that can cause so much discomfort. So that's another one of those situations where people may be focusing on what's good in their life, thinking positively, doing affirmations, doing all that kind of stuff. Um, and a lot of times that will help, but it's like when they pause and take a breath or get in bed at night, it catches up with them. The butts catch up with them, the things that are hurting or that keep them from feeling good about their life. And then finally, I've dealt with a number of people with malignancies. I dealt with one that was I'll say relatively minor. The malignancy was significant, but it was well localized. Um, and I did some pre-surgical prep with them that actually kind of quieted down the tumor and got everything, the tissues okay, and the surgery went really well, and they're fine. Um, and so, it can be very smooth like that. But I've been working over time here with a client with a persistent malignancy. And I asked the question one day, I said, we've done all these sessions and you still have the malignancy. It's still there. It's not doing anything to you. And I still have the sense that it is not going to kill you, but we have not found whatever it is that's persisting, that's giving rise to this tumor. And so we started talking about a trauma that we had not talked about before that I recall. I knew about another trauma that had happened, physical. This is physical trauma we're talking about. So there had been this accident when the person was young, um, and it 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 hurt, but it wasn't overwhelming. They weren't particularly stressed out about it. And so we were talking a little bit, and I was exploring the energy around that. And things were very vague. The energy was very vague. It was there, but it was vague. Um, and it was a wonderful example of situational unhappiness that had a lot to do with how the adults around this young child had reacted to the situation. Now, the injury was significant, but the kid didn't grasp that. They had no foundation in their experience to grasp that. And so they weren't particularly upset until the adults got upset. And, it was like and then they had to go to the hospital, and there was all this stuff that happened. Um, and they got through it essentially just fine, but they absorbed the fear and the anguish of the parents and other adults. I have a feeling some of the medical personnel looked at the wound and, because it was a physical injury, looked at the wound and went, oh my God. And so they picked up the sense of, I don't really understand what's happening to me. I don't understand what's dangerous. I don't understand the world, and I don't have any control over it because I don't understand it. And they literally have gone through their life with this underlying feeling. It's not the dominant thing. If you met them, you would never pick that up. Well, I won't say you never, because I know many of you are quite intuitive and you would pick it up. But, it's not obvious, shall we say. It's not on the surface. But there was this situational unhappiness that permeated through their life and was still contributing to some of their physical symptoms. It was a very interesting insight into that. And so, after I had relieved some of that energy and some other energies, I won't go into details on that, I was then able to do more effective work on the tumor and on the other problems that the person had. They had a number of problems. But these problems seemed to be related not just to the trauma, but to what they had picked up in their family. Not just the family's reaction to the trauma, but the whole family constellation, the energies, if you will, of that solar system of people. Um, and so, there was quite a bit of work for me to do, and I'm not sure it's yet done, but I will continue if I need to. All of these examples are saying that we either have pushed past the source of the problem and gone on to healing and on to learning more about ourselves and who we are and our strengths and what we're capable of. Or we've learned positive images and memes that make us look like we are competent, make us look like we're on top of stuff. But the symptoms tell us that we bypassed is a good word, we bypassed some of the trauma or the lack or the hurt and the situational uncomfortableness. And then we have to, those symptoms are telling us we have to deal with that residual energy that is keeping us unhappy or ill. Now, I remember hearing from Maharishi, I think it was, disease ends when the karma is complete. And he did not say, but I say, if the disease persists, the karma isn't complete. We haven't dealt with all the aspects, many of which may be very subtle. And so we have to go back in if the disease doesn't clear. So my usual approach, if somebody says I have a problem, is I go in and check, is this problem malleable to my approaches? And I may get yes, but you're going to have to go deeply into this. You're going to have to look into what the source of that karma truly is and work out all the aspects of it in order to clear that. So this is different than just peeling off layers of the onion, although it does sound a little bit like that. But we have to work till we get fully resolve the core issues. We have to fully resolve those core issues. We want to see the nature of what hurt us or that we have worked past that continues to hold the energy that preserves and lets our illness persist. So with that, wow, I've gone on for a while. I was really into that. Thanks, folks. Hope you're still awake. I'll be happy to entertain any questions at this point. But in the group clearing session that's coming up now, next, we're going to go into each of us into one example anyway of a problem that just won't go away, and we'll go through the steps and try to resolve them. Okay, any questions? You can put them in the chat. That's a good place to do it, but there is a Q&A also. Both of those work. And while you're doing that, I'll just remind those that have paid for this webinar that you can get a discount on a 3-session program if you sign up by the end of the month, May 31st. Look forward to working with you. You may discover, I gave some criteria before about why you might need me, but you may discover that whatever it is that is persisted in you, you just can't get a handle on, and so you need my help in clearing that energy up, clearing up what's behind that. The next webinar in June, again on the second Tuesday, will be on June 11th. That webinar, we're going to go revisit the topic of symbolic processing and healing through intention. So that'll be a fun topic. I made a little note, kind of a subtitle. It's the process that heals, not the specific content. And there is wisdom in that we will explore. There is process that heals. It's the process that heals. The process that we go through is what allows the healing to take place. It's not about the specific content. And in symbolic processing, a lot of times we don't deal with the actual content. It's a symbolism that comes up in our awareness, and that's quite sufficient. It's very powerful. You just go with what shows up and you don't analyze it. So we'll be covering all of that in June. And I'm not seeing any questions. So I am going to draw this portion to a close, this presentation to a close, and I will pick up in a few moments here with the group clearing session. Thank you all for attending. And oops, we're getting a question. I will go back. Can you work with an addictive pattern like tendencies to codependencies or weight? Yes. By going to what it is that's the need that's underlying your seeking behavior. Addiction is seeking something. So what is it you're seeking? And I had a really interesting experience with that myself recently. I was working on myself, formal session, because I something had come up, and I'll tell you what it was because it was kind of fun. Um, I found that at the end of the day, when I should be ready to go to bed and was already feeling tired, I would often open, usually YouTube, and just see what it offered. And what I had discovered over some many sessions, too many sessions, that was a judgment on my part. It was too many sessions. What I discovered was that I was looking for something, but I couldn't figure out what it was I was looking for. And so I kept doing that self referral process that I described earlier, asking that question over and over again. What is it about that? What is it that I need that's driving this? And then something would come up, and then I'd have to ask again and go deeper and deeper and deeper. But I finally got into the real core of what I was looking for, and it really surprised me. I don't even remember at this particular instant what it was, but there was something there that I was seeking and not finding. And so I would stay on YouTube or whatever for quite a while, stay up late and not get enough sleep. And so I dealt with that, and I may have to go back because I obviously am not remembering now what it was I was looking for, but it had something to do with a really gratifying experience. And then realizing when I really got there that actually that's what I was looking for, but that's not really how I feel good. And I knew how I felt good, which is by just being self-referral, being present. And, I'm pretty good at that. So I let go of that drive, and it really has helped. I really cut back on my YouTube watching. Okay, I'm going to end there. It says like looking at reels of rescue dogs and kind of wanting to get one. And then you can ask yourself, what is it about getting a rescue dog that would be satisfying? What am I looking for by getting a rescue dog or by viewing reels of rescue dogs or eating before bed when I'm not hungry? Same question. What would I be, um, pardon me, what would I be looking for? What am I desiring? And you may have to go through many layers, because you'll get sometimes a very superficial, well, I want this. What is it about that? It's that. What is it about that then? So you keep asking that question, a series of questions. Let me just make sure I answered all the other questions. I talked about karma. I hope I answered that. We can do more on that some other time. How do you know if you have dealt with your karma? I should let you answer your own question, but I'll answer it anyway. And the answer is very straightforward. Whatever it was that was bringing you unhappiness, the sensations, the awareness, the pain, the physical illness, it goes away. When the karma is done, the suffering ends, the disease ends. Dis-ease, if you will, this could be emotional, mental, spiritual. And so when that dissipates, you've dealt with it. When you have something that doesn't go away, that's the marker that it may be something, maybe worth putting more attention on. Okay, oops, there's one more message. You're welcome. Okay, ending here. We will see those of you who are watching this online sometime, hopefully at our next webinar, which again will be on June 11th, Symbolic Processing and Healing Through Intention. Okay.